First of all, welcome to everybody. And we're very honored to be hosting such a very important topic with a very important panel. We want to give a big yasher koach to Emunah Diamond, who's the person who thought of this idea and moved it along and shepherded it till tonight. And we want to welcome Mrs. Varda Berkowitz, a member of YUConnects. You saw her on the public publicity. We appreciate her taking from her valuable time to share her great experience with us. The setup is going to be that unfortunately we're not going to be able to make this a question and answer. People, you all submitted questions in advance. If during the presentations there is a follow-up question you would ask, I'm going to ask you to send me a personal chat. Don't send it to the whole group. Just send it to me. I will be looking at the chats. The speakers will not be able to. And I'll try to include it at some point. Okay, I'll try to include it if it's possible to follow up. So we've among the questions, we culled 5 main topics, and we'll be dealing each of them without listing the specific questions. I'll introduce each topic and then call on a couple of the presenters to give their approach. But what we want to do is we want to open first with Rabbi Shurin and Rebbetzin Shurin, giving us a few words of introduction and just giving their thoughts about why this is so important and how inspired we all are that you are so interested in, how we hope will be able to be an important resource for you. So Rabbi Shurin and Rebbetzin Shurin, if you want to just spend a couple of minutes of an introduction.
Do you guys hear me, first of all? Am I being heard?
Yes.
You go first.
Yes? Okay, great.
Yes.
Okay, so, you know, it is a very nerve-wracking experience especially for the beginners, meaning the people are getting into the Shidduchim, as opposed to some people who have had some experience already. The minute you have experience, you get a little bit more of an expert, hopefully eventually become a very big expert. But I really want to say the following thing. Number one, that the Shapell's and Midreshet Rachel parents who we're talking to tonight, so really what I want to tell you is something actually very simple, that I've seen a fair amount of Shidduchim over the years in the second generation, and the parents of these FFB children have done an excellent job, meaning there are very little divorces. I think it's lower than the standard rate in the Orthodox world, maybe even much lower. I've been watching it for a while, and that means that you guys are all thinking people, and that's very good material to begin with. And I think you have to keep doing that. In other words, I think more than maybe some other schools, Shapell's and Midreshet has empowered the students and the alumni to think for themselves within a Torah framework. Of course, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to give them a Torah framework within which to work, but to really think for themselves, because with Shidduchim, there's a lot of individuality. No two children are the same. I wish they were. It would make life so much easier. I mean, in one sense, I wish they were, but in other senses, that's the beauty of children, that they're actually two are not alike, but that means you have to be on guard for the next one, because the next one is not going to be necessarily like the first one. It's not going to be as easy as the first one. It's going to be very different. But again, my confidence in you guys is very strong, because I think that you do think for yourself. And if something sounds, incorrect, you guys will notice it. If the shidduch is incorrect because of one reason or another, which we'll discuss tonight, probably you guys will be aware of it, and you'll be able to guide your kids. And I do have full confidence in all of you.
Rebbetzin Shurin, did you want to add anything before we get started?
Yeah, I'd like to add that a lot of the questions that we saw relate to the fact that many of our alumni are Bali Tshuva and their children are FFBs. So the good part about that is that you have to really understand that your kids who are the FFBs really know the system. You may not know the system, but they do. They've grown up with it. They've heard it. They've been around. They're in the chevra, and I think that's one of the things that you have to bear in mind. Your kids know what's going on, and you don't have to worry about that. At the same time, the parent who is not coming from within the system has a certain advantage because he or she has a different perspective, and very often you will be able to see through the flaws in the system. And the system is set up to work for a certain society, and and it is what it is. It has its ups and downs, and it's not a simple thing to shidduch off all our children. But within the system, there are definitely things that don't work. They don't work for specific couples. They don't work for specific families. And a person who is coming from outside the system can use their understanding of the world to recognize where the system is not working for you, or where it's not working for your kid, and not to be what should I say, put into a box where you have to, this with regard to many things, with how many dates is a serious thing, and how many this, and how this works, and who gives what, and all the standard FFB, regulations. I don't think that, I think you can see where that's not going to work, and your kids will benefit from your wisdom. Okay. Husband says, make it short.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to open actually with the first topic, and we're going to call on first Rabbi Schoonmaker to address is the fact that it was alluded to, and this is something we always talk about, the challenge of Bali Tshuva raising FFB children, so that the types of homes, because it's a Bal Tshuva combination, Bal Tshuva FFB home, so you have to have a realistic assessment of where your child is and not project on your child what you want the child to be and what they're looking for. They have to make sure that the person that they're looking for, how do we deal with this? How do we, should we be looking for Bali Tshuva parents to make Shidduchim with, or FFBs? It's a big topic, and I think Rabbi Schoonmaker is going to open, and then we'll call on one of the other panelists to supplement. Rabbi Schoonmaker.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. I'm going to deal also specifically with the specific questions that came in first, and I'll deal a little bit with that Bali Tshuva FFB. So two of the questions that came in were, if my child would like to be Hasidic, and I obviously am not Hasidic, so how do I deal with that? And even for those who aren't Hasidic or have no dreams for their children to be Hasidic, or you are Hasidic and your children are Hasidic, I think there are some principles which would be important. And another question specifically I want to deal with was that our child grew up in a traditional American Orthodox home. This is how the question was phrased, where the father was working and learning seriously in the morning and night, and earn or learn, as we like to say, and the mother's running the home. And our daughters enjoy working and looking for boys who would keep that type of lifestyle, but that's so rare in Israel. That was the question. It appears that this is very rare in Israel, i.e. that someone is seriously learning and working, and the mother taking on, if you will, a more traditional role of just of being at home. So how do our girls find a shidduch to fit that lifestyle, or does it simply not exist in Israel? Okay, and then let's deal with those two, and then we'll talk more generally, which I have a little bit less to say, and I'm curious to hear what the other people say about the general FFB, Bal Tshuva question. So on to the question about child wants to be Hasidic, is Hasidic, how do we deal with that? So I think there are three terms which I want to get through. One is you have to really be active. You have to network. You have to find an ally. And all these words are important. Some people are very good at networking, right? What's the question? You don't live in that world at all. So first, if you don't know how to navigate that world, right? Not only you don't know how to navigate that world, you don't really know anyone in that world. So that makes it all the difficult. I made a shidduch with people across the street, and I have two mechutanim on the same block in Ramat Beit Shemesh, right? So I'm operating in a world I know. How do you work in a world where you don't know people? So you have to network. You have to go out of your way and make connections. You have to find people that you can work with. When I was looking into Yeshiva Ktana, Yeshiva High School for my sons, which was a new world for me at the time, my oldest son who's now married, I found about 5 or 6 yeshivas which I thought were matim generally to him, and I had a specific seder, an order that I had for every yeshiva that I would go to. Every place I went, I would speak to one Hanhala member and one regular Rebbe, and I tried to speak to the boys, and I would sit in the yeshiva building for about half an hour to get a feel for the yeshiva, and that did a tremendous amount of me of networking again and making some connections and seeing getting a lay of the land. So even though, and again, we're talking in the context of a specific question, but I think the model is important for everybody. You have to network and find out and really be active, more active than maybe we're used to, right? I'm not a good networker myself. That's not exactly natural to me, but if that's what you need to do, that's what you have to do for your child. And if you have to be active and act with a lot of zrizut and make those connections and really go out of your way, let's say in the specific context of that question about the Hasidic child, you have to really go find a general sense of some Hasidic enclaves type communities where that might fit. And of course, that itself is very wide. Does he want to be this type of chassid, that type of chassid, chassid klali? You have to narrow that down with him. And then you as the parent, I would advise to go to that place, and speak to some people, and you have to be a little more forward and a little bit more extroverted than you might be used to. And that's how you're going to help them. Create a system for yourself. Now, specifically, and this is something that I'll refer to maybe a few times in my remarks, is you have to find an ally. It's a new world for you, right? Many people are naturally not used to asking for help. It's not the way we're built to ask for help, to go out of our way, but here in this topic, this is for many, as was mentioned, brand new. It's not simple. And at the same time, it's extremely critical. You get it right. You don't want the first 2 kids to be guinea pigs, right? A lot of people say my bechor, he was a guinea pig. You don't want any child to be a guinea pig with shidduchim. So how do you do it? So it's, thank God, in this our wonderful institution that we're doing something like this. But this is just a touch of the overall thing. So you need an ally. The Lubavitcher Rebbe used to tell people when it came to medical matters to find a rofei yedid. Such an excellent term. Find a rofei yedid, a doctor who's a friend, someone who will take care of you. And the same thing here, when you're operating in a world which is different to you, which many of our alumni can be operating one way or the other. So you have to find someone who's someone you can turn to, someone who can mentor a little bit, someone you can ask questions to, someone who's shayach, who's part of whatever world you are dealing with. Now, at the same time, though, I would also advise very strongly, you have to know your values. In other words, a lot of times I think Bali Tshuva, specifically when the child is going to a world which is different, either if he's going to a world this side that's different, that side different, a Hasidic world, a Lithuanian world, a Alumni world, he's going to a world which is different than your world. So sometimes people throw up their hands and say, I have nothing to say to him anymore. That's a tremendous, tremendous mistake. You have to know who you are, what your values are, and believe in yourself. You still have what consistent with, if your biggest value is that, he should be this and he wants to be Hasidic and it runs straight against it. So then you're not living in the kid's world. But within living in the kid's world, being consistent with his vision, his individuality, to have values that you want to give over to the kids still going forward, I think is very important. That was the question as it related to someone going into the child wants to be Hasidic. Now, the next question, which I think might be more relevant to many of us, was, what do I do if my child, my daughter in this case, but it could be a question, could be my son, wants to work more? And again, just in phrasing the question, this is something which seems to be a rarity in Israel. So the first thing I want to say is it's not rare in Israel. I imagine the question was asked by someone from more yeshivish bend, because I think in the Datilu world, in the Dati Lumi world, that's a regular thing, that most of the graduates of Hezbollah yeshivas or non-Hezbollah yeshivas are going to be learning and working on different levels. So that's my assumption. Now, assuming that's true, the first part of the answer is similar to the last set of questions. You have to do the same thing, right? You have to work a little bit harder. You have to network. You have to find yeshivas. There are boys like this or girls like that, but you're going to have to network again and make connections and be active and get to know people and ask around a lot. Step one. Step two is my answer to this question today will be different than it was 10 years ago. 10 years ago, I didn't have too much experience with Shidduchim. But besides that, why would it be very different than I would have answered 10 years ago? Because the world is changing. The yeshivish world is an underground change, which is very significant, which means that there's a tens and hundreds today of solid learner boys, who are serious and have good values. They're not, off the derech in any way, shape, or form. They're not slick or anything else you want to say, but they don't see themselves as long-time Avrafim. This is a change which is going on. And once that's there, you still might have to look, my opinion, you might have to look longer, further and farther than you will for someone who's on the quote unquote regular path yeshiva boy that wants to stay learning a long time as a normal training is in that world. But they there. And this is a very impactful fact, and really it's something which needs, just as a word to the alumni who are in that world, it's an important thing to know because it's happening all over in a lot of different ways. It's really it's a very big topic, but in the meantime, I just say that this is something that Shurin or Berkowitz agrees very much with this, but it's just happening there. So there are many, many more. Unfortunately, there's not too much chinuch being given to these boys because they're living in a world which is speaking a different message than the message that they're really living with. But as opposed to a long time ago, they're the guys who were matzliach in yeshivas and the boys that were matzliach in yeshivas. There are a lot of boys that are matzliach, but not in the same way that the standard of the yeshiva is there. But nogea to the question, there are boys who definitely want to learn seriously and are dedicated to the learning and are serious about that, but also do want to work and don't see themselves as being long-time learners. But Lamais, as much as it's still not the norm, you need to check. And I wanted to add, for such a fellow, you have to check extra carefully because, that's the question. Was he, again, according to as I understand the question, there's a high standard in the family of the father learning morning and night, etc., and being a serious person working. So to find that boy, as much as it's still not, a norm, although it's a much bigger a much bigger minority than was happening, and many more boys that are like that, many more young men that are like that. So you have to work extra hard to check and see, is that really what's happening? What's the story with this boy? Is he burnt out? Does he hate learning? And that's his story? Or is it that he really likes learning, but he just doesn't see himself being a full-time full-time learner. Just another note, you mentioned in the question that your daughter was again, this is a point which I feel is relating to many of us. So I want to talk about the principle, just my opinion. You said in the question, it sounded like the wife wasn't working at all, it was basically at home, but you said your daughter has liked working. So, I'm always happy when I hear the daughters like to work today, because irregardless of the question of, long-term learning against non-long-term learning, it's very, very hard for, I think everybody knows, is better than me, that have a one person, whether it's the man or the woman bringing the parnasa, it doesn't really work. I usually advise boys in yeshiva if a girl wants the whole parnasa to be on you, to avoid such a shidduch, because it's too much. So I think you have to leave the boundary of, unless, the boy's a big entrepreneur or something, they'll make a lot of money. Most young men can't make enough money to support a whole family on their own. The wife at least has to work part-time. Okay, so those were those specific questions, which again, the rubric of that question in my mind was when a child is, when a child's looking for shidduch, which is not typical, either like the family against quote unquote the society, or when the child's looking for something altogether different than the family, and that's I tried to address. In terms of, do Bali Tshuva look for other Bali Tshuva? So generally, I think it's good that there's I'm going to answer the question as I see it and let everybody know where I don't know. Okay, I want to be honest. I think it's good there's a familiarity in the families. I know when Rav that I'm close with, my second son was, getting all types of fancy Israeli Rosh Yeshiva type Shidduchim, B'nai Brak, the Forbidden City, etc. And someone who knew my first mechutin and knew me well, a Rav, said, "This is not for you. This is not for you. You need a family which is like yours." And when I look back at the 4 Shidduchim that I've made, really all the families are pretty similar to my family. So I think that makes sense. In general, as a general model, that is a reasonable thing. The family should be similar. Does similar equal Baal Tshuva equals Baal Tshuva? That I'm not sure, because there's so much as people develop over the years and what they put in the family, and they're so affected by the firm world that they're part of. I'm just not sure. So not because I have one opinion or the other. Ani lo batuach. I don't know. Similarity, yes. Does that mean Baal Tshuva? Baal Tshuva, maybe. I'm not sure. Now, of course, obviously, just to add into my last final comment, it obviously depends on who the child is, right? You have children who are very different than their families. Now, I know in our alumni, there are many like that, and can dafka thrive in a family which is very, very different. Let's say a great example. Someone comes from a typical Lithuanian family, with Lithuanian values, and he wants to be a Breslover, right? To marry him into a family where they're going to tell him he's a Rosh Hashanah for going to Uman on Rosh Hashanah is not a good idea. So even though the families are similar this way, you have to live with the reality of the child. So you have to be very careful. Okay, but I'm curious myself to hear, more specifics about this Baal Tshuva against Baal Tshuva question. Thank you.
Okay, I think we'll probably touch on this topic as we go through the other questions too. So I think I'm going to move on to the next question and ask Rabbi Shurin and Rebbetzin Shurin to address it, and then I think Varda is going to have something to add at the end, and that is the question of the readiness of the child, both an emotional and maturity level, as well as on a practical level. Some kids are dying to get married when they're not ready. Some kids are very ready and they're hesitant. How do you know when your child is ready to get married? Who should make the decision? So I'd like the Shurins to start with this, and then I think Varda is going to have something to add afterwards.
I want to say that I think it's really important for the parents to understand that when a child starts dating is really not up to you. I feel it's an extremely big mistake to push a child. And this is one of the things where I say the system doesn't necessarily work, because there are, in the FFB world, there are numbers and there are ages when you're supposed to start dating. And I think that's a very big mistake to go with whatever you're supposed to do. Now, again, you could have a kid who's dying to get married, like you said, but is not ready. And you have to assess as a parent the maturity level, the emotional level, and being single is a very selfish affair. And being married is a lot about giving and learning how to deal with another person and to give to another person. And if the child is not ready to do that, if they're in some kind of fairy tale, then you as a parent need to see that and to slow them down. On the other hand, somebody wrote in the question about their being involved in their education, and I think it's very legitimate if a kid wants to finish a certain place in their education before they start dating. And of course, this is all in moderation. If the kid is waiting too long, then you need to get behind them and give a gentle nudge. But my father, he shouldn't be well. My father says the difference between not being ready and being ready is one day. I had that with some of my kids. I had one of my daughters who was like, no, 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 no. And then her friend started telling about a specific guy, and she came to me and she said, I heard about this guy, could you look into it for me? And she married him. And there you go. She was ready. And Baruch Hashem.
Rabbi Shurin, did you want to add anything to that?
Okay, so look, I of course, I agree with Esther, because even if I didn't, I would not say so. But I do think that a child does need, to, feel ready and can get a gentle nudge. But I don't think that one thing you should be careful of is don't allow society and the society norms, like if the child that, in your society gets married at 19, don't push the child just because everybody else is doing it. I've heard this idea. I've asked girls, and they've said to me, not girls from Shapell, from birth girls, why do you want to get married? The answer was because everybody else is. That's a bad reason. So therefore, yes, a gentle push is good, but if the child is not ready, there is a certain amount of time. Again, like Esther said, you don't have to wait. You can't wait till the child is like, in their 30s if they started out at 19. But a short amount of, there is a span of a few years that I've seen, girls not getting married in the typical frum world, even the Haredi world, not at the age of 19, 20, but the age of 22, 23. And actually, it works out much better for the guy because the woman finished school, the woman is more mature now, the woman has worked in the working world, and therefore it could be a great advantage as well.
Okay, Varda, did you want to add something? I'll introduce Varda also for the first time you're hearing her. And I think Varda had a couple of things to add to this discussion.
Yes. Okay. So what I wanted to say was that I don't think that we addressed the situation where the child says they want to go into Shidduchim and the parents don't feel they're ready. And I feel that there's a middle ground, meaning you often look at it as all or nothing, but it's similar to what Esther Shurin mentioned, where her daughter came to her and said, I heard about this guy, could you please look into him for me? And that's what I usually tell the parents at that point. I say, it doesn't have to be full-blown dragging your child to meet every shadchan in the world and putting their resume out there. You could take a wait and see attitude in the beginning. You can see what kind of suggestions your child is getting, what kind of things people are presenting to you. And if you see something that looks of interest to you, that becomes a springboard for having discussions about going into Shidduchim. So I would call that listening rather than talking when it comes to Shidduchim. In terms of actually starting and readiness, so there are two sides to readiness, and it's similar to lahavdil, but let's use the analogy of getting a job. You need the degree, you need the readiness to go into the job market, but then you also need the tools, what I call the toolkit for getting a job. So that means you have to have a good resume, you have to have good interview skills, you have to be put together. And all of these things come into play with Shidduchim in the sense that we have to assess the readiness of the child emotionally to go into looking for a marriage partner, but we also have to look at, has the family put together the tools that they need to start their search?
Did you want to elaborate on that, or that's pretty much?
Oh, well, no, I mean,
yeah.
I could elaborate, but I think everyone knows what I mean, meaning you need a resume. If it's the question of the girls, they have to have the right wardrobe. The boys have to have the right wardrobe. They have to be equipped in more practical ways to actually go about the search.
I want to just ask Varda, I mean, let's say these parents don't feel equipped to make a resume. Where do they go for that?
Well, they can go to friends who have already been at that stage.
Mhm.
They can go to the shadchan and they can say to the shadchan, what do you think I should put on my resume? I mean, shadchanim see many resumes. So we do, have opinions about what makes a resume more effective versus a resume that maybe might not be as effective. But I have to stress that all of this is in Hashem's hands, because you could have the person who has the worst resume in the world and they have tremendous hatzlacha, and the person who has a perfect resume and things might not go so easily for them. But in terms of our own hishtadlus, we should be doing the best that we can do. We should put the best efforts in that we can.
Maybe this will be the perfect point to transition to the next question again, and maybe I'll ask Varda to continue with it, and then maybe turn it over also to have Rebbetzin Shurin add a little bit. And that is, the topic is the proper way to interact with a shadchan. How, as a parent, do we deal with the shadchan? How do we find shidduchim when our kids are different than us? Different shidduchim in different communities, and what different shadchanut services exist, and how do you best promote your child to a shadchan and make contact? So we'll start with Varda, and then maybe Rebbetzin Shurin will have what to add on that.
Okay, well, that's a lot to fit in. I'll try to do my best to give a short perspective on this. I think that many people would be surprised to know, and it's only recently, because of so much emphasis on shidduchim in the community, that there's actually been an effort to quantify this. But between 60 and 70% of all shidduchim are suggested by friends and family. And that, I'm saying that to dispel the myth, because we often hear about shadchanim who have had a lot of success making, many, many shidduchim, and people think, wow, they thought of all those matches. Well, I'm going to give a news flash and tell you that in most cases, they did not think of all of the matches. The matches came from family and friends who thought of the match, and then after getting a mutual yes from both sides, turned the match over to someone who's more experienced to facilitate the match. And I think this is a great model. I think it's a great thing. I think this is something that parents can do. I tell everyone, take out your, okay, maybe I'm dating myself, take out your address book, I don't know, take out your WhatsApp list or your last Simcha list and call people and say, by the way, maybe you didn't know, we have a daughter who's in Shidduchim, and this is what she's all about, and this is what she's looking for. The same possibly with your son. However you feel, whoever it is in your family you feel you want to network for. So now when this is getting to the most important piece, is this, what are you going to say about your child? I call it the elevator pitch. Okay, everybody knows that, they talk about, you have those few minutes when you're riding in the elevator with the very wealthy man to sell your idea of your company. Well, you have those few minutes when you're sitting next to someone at a chasana, or you're on the phone with them about something, or you meet them in the store, and you want to tell them quickly about your child and what they're looking for. So this, you really have to make an effort to craft this. And again, shadchanim can help you with this if you need help. But, I would say avoid cliches, give real descriptive things that tell about your child, and have a sense of where they fit in to the larger spectrum of things, and give concrete examples. So if you want to say about your daughter that she's a big balas chesed, what does she do that makes her a big balas chesed? I'm trying to be short. I could probably talk for 20 minutes about each of these things, but I'm trying to just go through everything briefly. In terms of interacting with shadchanim, the best thing to do is ask the shadchan. When you speak with the shadchan, what is the best way for me to be in touch with you? Some shadchanim will say, don't call me, I'll call you. All the way to, I would love to hear from you once every couple of weeks. And the thing I have to tell you is, please don't take anything personally, because we don't know what the shadchan has going on in their life. They could be, I know a very well-known shadchan who only works on email and will not respond to any emails. But I know personally that she's very busy working behind the scenes on everyone who contacts her. So you're not being ignored by her. So don't take it personally, but ask the shadchan how they want you to be in touch and how often. When your children are not fitting in, that gives me an opportunity to jump in about YUConnects. I'm here representing YUConnects. YUConnects works on a traditional shadchan system, but it is a online dating service. So it means that the men's profiles are posted, the women's profiles are posted, but no one can see each other unless they are matched by a matchmaker. And what that allows for is more unlikely kind of pairings that might not happen with a lot of hatzlacha. And anybody that wants to hear more about it is welcome to be in touch with me. Anything else you want me to address, Rabbi Karlinsky, that I didn't?
Again, how is the shadchan system as prevalent in the more modern world as is in the Haredi world?
It is becoming so. It was not always that way. It is becoming much more prevalent. A lot of the venues where singles could meet in a kosher way are no longer available, and so it is becoming much more prevalent.
Okay, Esther, did you want to add anything
Can I
to
add
that?
something?
Oh,
over here?
Rabbi Shurin, go ahead, please.
Esther, would you like to add something?
I just wanted to say that things went a little differently in Israel and in America, and I know that in the Alumni circles, a lot of times the children do not want to speak to a shadchan; they only want to be set up by friends. This is this is a little bit of a wrinkle for a parent who wants to help, but once you go through the introduction, like you hear of a certain person, the basic bottom line is you still are going through the same steps of looking into the person and finding out about the person, and then trying to facilitate. But they may not be interested in a shadchan at all.
That's going to lead us to the next question about parental involvement. So just before we transition to that, let me just hear if Rabbi Shurin wanted to add anything about the shadchan.
I want to add that I want to back Varda very much on this. First of all, she said that most of the time it's friends and family, and I've seen time and time again that actually a good example would be my own shidduch, right? Myself and Esther were going through a shadchan. Ramosha Feinstein's secretary. He was doing shadchan. He was a shadchan before, before there was anything such as a computer, and he would put couples together. And he never put myself and Esther together.
He had 100 couples every Motzei Shabbos, so they said. 100 couples.
He had 100 couples going out every Motzei Shabbos and never put myself and Esther together. Meanwhile, Esther's brother was sitting next to me in the Beit Midrash, okay? And he's the one who put us together, okay? But he felt he can't, this is exactly what Varda said, he felt he can't set us up. So he figured out, he was a Balkori in the shul of my uncle, and he figured out that my uncle could set up this shidduch because my uncle knew me and my uncle knew Esther's family. So it's exactly what Varda said, number one. Number two, our first daughter met her husband because Esther and I were at a chasana, which we didn't intend to stay for, but something happened with the ksuva, so we had to stay. Esther was by the table, and she spoke to everybody at the table and said, look, I have a daughter in Shidduchim. She told everybody about our daughter. And then, of course, during the table, somebody actually knew somebody who knew somebody, and that's the way the shidduch happened.
I have to say this, I learned this from my father, he should live and be well. I was walking in the street with him, And he said to somebody he met, "This is my daughter, she needs a shidduch." It was like, whatever. he was, and he only had 4 daughters. We had twice as many. Can I know? We had, you have to be proactive, and it doesn't have to be a shadchan. It's exactly what Varda said. You talk to people. If your kid is interested and you say, "This is my kid. I actually have 2 shidduchim, one that my husband mentioned, my oldest, and my younger son, where the shadchan didn't know either side." Seriously. I mentioned to my neighbor that my son was looking for a shidduch. I mentioned 2 salient facts about him. She told her friend told her daughter, my son is into Breslov, my younger son. So she said, "I know a girl from Tzfat." There you go. These are things you have to know, because you have to talk to everybody, and you never know where the gula is coming from. And that's why it's like Kriyas Yamsuf. Kriyas Yamsuf, the Maestro was sitting there, and they didn't know where the shoe was going to come from. Right?
I'll just weigh in if I could.
Let me try to weigh in here. Go ahead.
2 more examples. My oldest daughter and my youngest son. So my oldest daughter, Rabbi Shurin's uncle, Reb Nosson Kamenetsky, knew a very chashuv Talmud in the yeshiva that he was in, and he knew our family very well. And he calls me up and says, I know you have a great daughter, and I have the best guy in Itri Yeshiva. Are you interested? On the other end, my youngest son, his roommate had a sister, and he said, "Hey, he suggested to the family about my son, and it turned out that my mechutenista and my wife went to high school together. They were in Israel." But my son was best friends with his brother-in-law throughout yeshiva, and they never thought of anything. And then one day, my son's in Shidduchim. As soon as he got into Shidduchim, his chavrusa roommate said, "Hey, what about my sister?" So it's really a very fluid thing, and people think they have to break down the doors of all the shadchanim. It's not necessarily true. There's lots of resources, and you have to be thinking in many directions.
I want to add something else here. Can I add that Dachinom is its own big family, and your friends and your connections, they know you, and they're also going to advocate for you. So I think that we have a bunch of Dachinom Shidduchim in-house Shidduchim, and our own son-in-law, one of my sons-in-law is a son of alum. So it's people that become very good connections, and that's what Rabbi Schoonmaker was talking about, networking. And
I should point out that I see at least 2 alumni or 4 alumni families who make shidduchim with each other who are on this call. So there's a lot of networking here also. And again, it's all about networking, which is where Rabbi Schoonmaker started. So let's move to the next topic.
But I got to tell my story for a second, which is that the neighbor across the street calls my wife about her son. My wife, knows these things, and she starts describing her son. Does my wife know anybody for him? And of course she did it. That was my daughter Huba. So
this is a perfect segue to the next topic, and that's parental involvement. And I'm going to ask Rabbi Schoonmaker to start with it. How involved should parents be? Where's the balance between a parent interfering versus a parent being a help? And what's reasonable hishtadlus for the parent? And maybe you have some of the Rabbi Schoonmaker, and then we're going to ask Varda also to weigh in on this question of the balance between parental involvement and independence for the child.
There's a joke about a Yerushalmi boy speaks to his father's friend Itchemeyer, and Itchemeyer says to him, "Yankel, I heard you're getting engaged tonight." He says, "Yeah, I'm getting engaged tonight." He runs to his father, "Tati, it's true I'm getting engaged tonight?" He says, "It's none of your business." Anyway, that's so this is an excellent question. I think again, we're talking about like parents' involvement, helping as opposed to interfering. So I think the Aleph Shabbalef, and it's simple, but it's not as simple as it says, is that we have to keep the child's best interest in front of our eyes all the time, which sounds simple, right? But people think about what they like as a son-in-law, or like as a daughter-in-law, or their image, sometimes even worse, less in our circles, I think less in Darchinon, but we're all, mi yomer ein belibo marima, who can say that our hearts are totally pure? So the first question in terms of helping a kid and helping any person, giving an eitzah hogenis, giving a correct eitzah, and not being over on the lav of lifnei iver lo sisay michshol, not to give a bad eitzah, God forbid, is that the only thing you see is the person in front of you. And Kol Sheken with our kids. And on the one hand, it's obvious because it's our child. Of course, we want the best for him. On the other hand, it's difficult because it's our child, and we have a lot invested in our kids. So that's the first thing attitudinally, before eitzah, before technique. Attitudinally, we have to make sure that the only thing we see and the only thing we're interested in is what's best for our child. In fact, I spoke to someone who you all know. I don't know if he wants me to say who he is, but someone very connected to Darchinom. I said, "How are you so much liach with your children?" He says, "I don't answer such questions, but one thing I want to tell you, everything I did was always for the kid, and I never made cheshbonos that was, I never was thinking, calculating what was good for me." Next, you have to make sure they're getting what they need. I would advise, even before starting or different milestones in the dating process, there's some open communication to the child. He's the partner. It's not just about asking Varda and the Shurins and Karlinsky. Ask the kid, how would you like us to be involved? How can I help you here? What do you see? Now, you don't have to necessarily totally listen to his answer. Like if Shurin says, we pay you to give us advice, not necessarily you don't have to take it. But the kid we should be partnering him. She is the partner in this. And I want to add a very sensitive point sometimes. I think a question really to ask is, which parent sometimes would you rather deal with? This depends on the dynamics of the family, and it's sensitive because sometimes you have a parent who put more into a child as things go, a lot of times the mother, but it could be your daughter Dafka wants to speak to your husband for one reason or the other. And it's not a sign that he doesn't love you, mom. And it's not a sign that he doesn't love you, dad. But for some reason, something like this, it's very sensitive. A kid has never been in the position before, and you have to really give them what they want. And if they want to talk to your spouse, you'll get your licks in on the side. You'll be discussing in the bedroom, but that should be open to the child. They shouldn't feel that a kid shouldn't feel he has to check his boxes within his parents. So they have to speak to somebody, that's for sure, just in terms of speaking to somebody. If it's you, great. If for some reason it's not like that, so if that hasn't developed, which even amongst people in chinuch and even amongst people give a lot of eitzah, give a lot of advice to others, it's not always like that for one reason or the other. You have to make sure that they're finding that mentor, that person who can help them out, who can guide them, who they can speak openly to. If they are speaking to you, this is a mussar to myself, you have to be a better listener often than you're used to, in terms of both focus and time. I mean, some of us are used to listening and being on our phones at the same time. I call you. Some of us are used to, doing three things at once, and maybe we can get away with it. Or sometimes we're very busy and we listen to our kids, and time's enough. Or the kid is going through a very, very difficult and a very critical time, and it really has to feel that you're really focused on them, and you're really and you're giving them the time. I want to just say a side point, which I think is important for parents to realize, just a side point about how all Shidduchim work, but specifically when we talk about time, especially for people who are in less low tension jobs, and I hope some of you are, even in 2020, Shidduchim, Varda could tell you, often is very, very intense. It's very fast. In a faster system, when you're only going out 6 to 10 times, it's very intense. The shotgun wants to know the answer. The other side wants to know the answer. You're pushed to make decisions, faster than you're used to a lot of times. Really, I think no matter what camp you're part of, there's going to become a time the kid, the boy is ready to say yes. You're not ready yet. So the kid is living in that tension also. Sometimes the kid is generating that tension because they're pushing to get engaged faster than you want. So, but what I mean to say in the context of parent-child, it's a high tension situation, which you might not be used to. They're probably, unless they were Sayart Matkal, are not used to it. So you really have to go out of your way to be an oasis of calm and caring for your child, a plank for them to hold on to in a really trying time, even though it's trying to you, because you're freaking out yourself. Oh, my daughter's going to get engaged. Oh, my son's going to get engaged. And you're not even sure. Do I like the mechutanim? Do I like the boy? Do you have 10 sveikot yourself? So you're living with your own inner turmoil excitement, etc. But the child really needs you to be focused on them and to be calm. I want to emphasize that. And so that's finding them the help they need. By the way, if you think they're making a mistake, and be very careful, obviously, but someone has to, I don't know exactly how, when, but that's something that's important to get across to them. You don't want to give a feeling like you don't like your son-in-law or you don't like your daughter-in-law, and they might end up marrying them. But if it's a stage where it's shayach, and parents do see things sometimes, and if you see something that's a tremendous kas or who knows what, something that's really off in the person, kids fall in love. All the systems are going pretty fast today. It happens really fast. They're impatient, and it's important to point out who points that out. I was told that the worst person to deal with a person when he wants to jump is the family, because it puts pressure on a person. A lot of times that causes, God forbid, a person to commit suicide. It's not the same thing, but you have to make sure. It could be you need an uncle, an aunt, sometimes an older sibling of the child, an older sibling yourself, to get involved. But don't, make a decision about it. I think that's what I would say. If you think I'm not saying what to do, and it could be it's a kind of time when you need someone more experienced, very possibly someone you need more experience than you. But if you think the kid's making mistakes, so that's a time to get involved, and you have to know how to get involved, and you really need help at that point. Just like what's, what just in terms of how much hishtadlus, I don't have a specific formula for that, but I want to say a story about Rabbi Yaakov Weinberg, the Rosh Yeshiva of Ner Yisrael, Rav Ruderman's son-in-law. So he relates that one time. Father called him about getting a chavrusa, study buddy for his son, and Rabbi Yaakov said there's nobody free in the yeshiva, and the father pestered him a lot, and he said, you know what? And I found the kid a chavrusa. So you have to be very careful. We're going to get into that in a second. It's a dance, because you don't want to put, as Varda said, and for sure it's true, and Shadchanim are doing us a favor, and they deserve a lot more credit than they get, and everybody forgets them. So, but sometimes a well-placed, correct, gentle comment keeps your child in focus, which sometimes they can get out of focus. Like was well said, and all the connections. But when you do need the shadchan, people, everybody I know is running a program. You try to keep focus on everything. You lose focus sometimes. Why didn't I take care of this thing? I tell people, call me about jobs, don't feel free to call in another 3 months. Something might change. I'm not going to Rolodex everybody I ever met in the last 2 years. And maybe if that's the name that's there in front of us at the right time. So you do want to keep your child in a friendly way forefront. Now, what I do want to talk about is researching, how to research. I think this is very important. And I'm excited to share this, because it's a point which I like to make a lot, which is that, I'll say it honestly for everybody's toelis, I'm shocked at how unintelligent sometimes the calls I get. I'm just shocked by it. What's the right way to research? In my opinion, it's a dance again. It's a dance. You have to be very careful not to come across to people who are your friends and allies and doing you a chesed, and they're good people, shadchanim, and friends, etc. Or the person you're asking a question to, right? The person you're asking is giving you their time, right? You call someone, they have no obligation to answer your question. They're giving you 20 minutes of their time. That's a chesed they're doing for you. So on the one hand, I'm calling someone, and certainly they're doing me a chesed. On the other hand, you can't come across gruff and pushy, and you have to be cognizant, like I said, of the relationship, but you need to find out what you need to know. You need to. And, I'll get specific, I think there's mentioned a little bit before, specific questions, direct questions, specific, direct. Are they nice people is not at all as good a question as, are they helpful to their neighbors? They both sound similar, but listen to the difference. Are they nice people? Nice people could mean, Goring was also a nice person to his family. What does it mean, nice people? It's nice people that's so open. Are they helpful to their neighbors? That slices to the issue. Just an example. Ishia balas chesed. That's such a general question. Could you illustrate? Ask for illustrations. Ask for examples. I know if you feel like this isn't comfortable because you're pressuring the person, you are, and that's the dance. You have to do it, especially people who aren't as used to that. in chinuch, you get used to that. You have a lot of practice. People in chinuch have a lot of practice pushing and pulling and right-handing and left-handing. But I believe you have to do it here because, again, I've been on both sides of it. I've asked a lot of questions for families, since my daughter and my sister already. I was very involved in my sister's Shidduchim back then, and my own kids and Talmidim, and many people ask me about boys in yeshiva. So, and I hear the lack of distinction sometimes, and I hear the lack of I hate to say it, intelligence, how people are asking. It's not a thought out process. It's not like they're just going through a checklist. It's like knowing that they asked the question, check. Of course, if you don't ask specific questions, you're going to get non-specific answers. There was a question also about emotional health. I think the same thing. You have to be very, very careful and very sensitive. But that's also kind of like a direct question. That was mentioned in I don't know if it was in this set. I think it was in this set. You find someone who was a mentor of the person, not the Rosh Yeshiva of a yeshiva with the 300 boys, someone who is the person's Rebbe, a Rebbe of that fellow, or a Madrich, even good, a roommate, someone who knows what the person's really like. Just 1 second. I just want to, again, I'm saying this is chizik to everybody. We're all Darchei Noam, we're Noam, we're all about Nimas, right? We're nice. We are friendly. We don't like confrontation. But so asking reference questions the right way, as I see it, is not in your comfort zone. But and no one likes to be the bad guy. We're in the parshas of Yitzchak. We're not saying the Torah, but Yitzchak was all about din. I mean, this is what Avram, everybody understands. Chesed, sure, but the Torah gives Yitzchak a lot of. Yitzchak was one of our avos also. The many boys named Yitzchak. Rabbi Shurin is named Yitzchak. We don't have to go any further. So we have to his meet a little bit of midas adin. Again, it's a dance. I know it's a dance. They're doing a favor, and you don't want to come across. You don't want to get a name as being that, and that's why. And sometimes if you're not as good as that, you maybe have to practice. You have to learn from someone. You have to ask. I'll sometimes play like a role play with my talmidim, to give them a little bit of a sense. And by the way, I would personally sometimes, even when I would call, I would apologize to the person ahead of time. I apologize. I'm going to be a little pushy, but there's no. I don't see another way. And specifically, you have no poskim say that the more direct the question, the more you're allowed. There are times that people ask me questions I don't answer because they didn't ask the right question, and I'm not mechuyev to answer, and I don't want to answer, and the question wasn't good enough that I had to answer. And if they would have asked differently, then according to everybody has to ask their rav, but I would have felt far more obliged to answer. So specific question is very important. Just a word about two other quick words. What do you have to ask about was also mentioned if you're asking questions. Now, obviously, about the main things, midas, the kas. Chesed, simcha, gaiva. If they're giving person, as Rebbetzin Shurin mentioned before, the tznius of the person, the boy go to minyan, the values, are they hardworking or not? And then obviously depends on your child. And just one more. There's the last thing I want to say as part of this is that, and this is a hard one for us again, is that you're presenting your child, so you want to present your child in the best light, obviously, but you know what? You also have to be honest about your child. I hear sometimes, I get phone calls, and it's clear to me that the person is looking for someone for himself, a nice son-in-law from him, and not for someone for his daughter, because I know the daughter, and what he's asking is he's not asking about the daughter. So I'll assume it's not just because of his image. He's not really honest about who the kid is. Everybody likes to say that someone else started the fight and the kid fell in with a bad crowd. Well, guess what? Someone had to fight. Someone had to start the fight, and someone was the bad crowd, right? So every child is good. Every yid is good. Every person is good. Our children are good. All children are good. All yidden are good. All people are good. But you have to know who your child is to make a right assessment. You don't want to set your child up with someone who's not matim to them. Someone who's on a much, much higher level or on a lower level or on a different level. It's not in their best interest, not in the shalom bayis' best interest. It's not, there are many differences between people today. We live in a very open world with lots of possibilities. And when people are different and you're not seeing the kid honestly, I would say you have to be honest, and spouses have to help each other here, because sometimes naturally one spouse could be more objective about the child and say, this girl, she's just too much of a tzaddikus for our son. It's not going to be good for him. He's not going to feel respected. He's not going to feel loved. This boy, he wants to he wants to learn every night for 3 hours and she wants to go out at night. That's a big difference in a shidduch. So you have to know, you have to have an honest sense of your child is for their best interest.
Rabbi Schoonmaker, I'm going to now ask Varda if she wants to add to this question, because I know there's a lot more to say.
Okay, so I'll try to be brief on this. I second everything that Rabbi Schoonmaker said. I feel it was excellent advice. I just want to add a few more points. So the first thing I want to say is that, the Shurins mentioned this in the beginning. Let's start with just the basic idea of it's a Baal Tshuva family, and the proposed shidduch is an FFB family. That's a question. Okay, I'm looking at our families, and our families are very different. What makes you think that this is a match? What makes you think that our children will match with this other family's children? And it doesn't have to be BT, FFB. It could be any situation where the families are different, either religiously or in terms of background or financial standing or whatever. So that's a great, not antagonistic, open and questioning question to start with. And I think you could get a lot of information from that kind of a question. So the second thing I want to mention is there's a big difference in approach, what I like to call on the road or off the road. So some people feel strongly that you should never talk to anyone who's on a resume. No resumes, because the people on the resume, they drank the Kool-Aid. They're only going to say good things about the family. They're only going to say good things about the single. So don't talk to anyone on the resume. My feeling about it is that unless you are very, very well connected, you have to start with the resume. I mean, some people, some of my friends who are FFBs and, they know everyone in the world. I couldn't say that was true for our family, but I will give you an eitzah that was very helpful to us, is that if you start with the people on the resume, and every time you talk to someone on the resume, you say to them, oh, could you give me the name of someone else who knows them? If you do that a couple of times, you are now 3 times, let's say, removed from the people on the resume. Those are people who might not have been coached by the family as to what to say about them. You're going to get closer to maybe hearing some not partial answers about the family or the single. A couple more points. I think you have to look at a resume and know who to ask what. Asking the next door neighbor about the boy's learning is not particularly valuable. She sees the boy walking around with a sefer under his arm. She's going to tell you, oh, he's such a big masmid. You can't believe it. He's always learning. You're only going to know that by talking to the boy's Rosh Yeshiva, because the boy's Rosh Yeshiva is the one who could tell you what kind of a learner he is. Similarly, if you want to find out about whether the boy has certain practices that you might not approve of, that's something to talk to the friends about, because the Rosh Yeshiva might not know what goes on in the dormitory. So, you have to really be smart about who to ask what, and understand that people know you might not get a full picture from talking to one person. And the last thing I want to say is that we were always advised by our Rav to speak to as many people as we can as possible about a match. Now, it doesn't mean you have to be on the phone 24/7 and you're getting pressure to answer about the match. I'm talking about within a normal amount of hishtadlus. But the reason for talking to a lot of people is because you will start to see patterns. You will start to hear, as Rabbi Schoonmaker said, are they helpful to their neighbors? If everyone tells you stories about how helpful and giving and wonderful these people are, you could start to see that this is a midah, this is a trait that they have. Maybe it's a trait in the family that the children have. But listen with an ear of hearing things that are repeating that you're hearing from the different people that you speak to. And that could give you more of a sense of who they are.
Okay, I'm going to just add one point from our experience. We had a phrase in our family when we were doing research. So we always wanted to know, are we speaking to somebody who's on our side or on their side? In other words, you on their resume, you're going to find people who are, quote, on their side, meaning they have the interest of everybody has to know whose interest do you have. I know that my friends have my interests rather than a stranger's interest. And so what we always try to do is find people who are our friends who can network and find out something more honestly about them than what the other side's friends are going to say, because the other side's friends are always going to tell you the good stuff. And if you want to make sure that there's nothing hidden under the surface, you have to find people who, as we used to say, they're letovatenu. They're worried about us. They want to help they're interested in us. And that's an important point when you're doing research. Again, I think Varda gave you the way to do it, is when you're talking to the person who's on their side, ask for more names until you can find somebody that interfaces with one of your friends, and that way they can probably help you better. I want to go to the last question.
So Rabbi Karlinski, could I just add one more thing? So I want to say that if you feel you're at a dead end and you have a question about something and you really aren't getting answers, or you feel that there could be benefit to the match, but you just still have doubts or whatever, don't be afraid to go to someone who's in a position of authority, a Rav, a Rosh Yeshiva, someone bigger than yourself, and say to them, I haven't been able to find this out about this family, or we're interested, but we don't know. We have doubts about this or that. It's very likely that the person who's in a position of authority can help either by finding out himself or by calling someone else the family knows, their family Rav, or someone they're affiliated with, and you can get answers. So if you have questions, don't give up on a match. Keep going and seek help from someone who could help you in a position of authority.
Okay, can
I add something?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. I just want to say, because we haven't really we've discussed the parents, which that makes sense, but we really haven't discussed the children going out on the date, so to speak, and getting to know each other. I think it's important that the parents ask the child the right questions, meaning in order to, after you've heard that this guy is a great guy, you heard this girl's a great girl, right? They could have objectively been great, but they're not really good for each other. One psychologist once told me about a couple that was seeing them, which I knew the couple, and I said, are they marriageable? And he said, yes, but not to each other, right? And this is an important idea. So I want to just say what I have found is when parents want to know how the shidduch is going, one of the questions that should be asked, I'll give you a few different questions that should be asked that I found helpful. And so did so when I asked my students, because a lot of the students I'm sort of their parents. So one question was, do you feel respected from the guy? And I've had students that say, I don't really know. He never lets me talk, right? So that means you don't feel respected from the guy. The guy's not letting you talk. He doesn't respect you. Do you feel safe with this person? I don't mean physically safe. Do you feel emotionally safe with the person? Do you feel that he understands where you're coming from, that he understands you? Do you feel relaxed with the person? Are you walking on eggshells, right? Do you feel he's judging you for who you are, right? Do you feel you could be totally yourself, right? If they can answer all these questions in a positive way, that's great. But if they can't, then that is somewhat of a red light. And they should be, the children should be looking for some yellow lights and red lights. They have to do that themselves because they're mature enough to get married. They're mature enough to see red light.
Well, I think we're actually heading to the last point that we wanted to make, and Rabbi Shurin really opened the door for it. And that is, how can you help your children make the decision? So Rabbi Shurin put on the table the idea of figuring out questions to ask your children when they come home from the dates. And Rabbi Shurin had a whole list, maybe also Varda, I think in our earlier discussions had some ideas on that also from her experience, is how do you help your child decide if this is right? Varda, do you want to weigh in on that a little bit?
Sure. Rabbi Shurin started the answer. I think what I would say about the answer, my piece of that answer, which I'm just going on his coattails, but I think it's to shift away the focus from facts to feelings, because facts we know, we can determine facts about the person very easily, and I think a lot of young people get sort of caught up in a lot of hashkafa questions and things that they have to find out about the other person. But more telling about a couple or a relationship is, how do you feel when you're with the person? How does the person make you feel about yourself? What are you looking forward to seeing them again? Do you feel a sense of excitement about seeing them, spending more time with them? And what we always said to our is, we said, you have to find someone who accepts you for who you are, but challenges you to be better than who you are. And if either one of those things is missing in the relationship, then chances are it's not going to be the right person. And actually, this is a pretty universal thing that they found with couples, that a lot, when they ask couples about in healthy, productive marriages, what it is about the other person that makes them so special, they'll say they make me better, they make my life better, they challenge me to be better, and I'm becoming a better person because I'm with them. And I think if we could keep the focus on that, that's a tremendous gift that we could give to our children.
I'd like
Rabbi
to add
Shurin.
something. Can I
Yes,
add
go
something?
ahead.
I always like to simplify things with my kids, because, once the dating process going further along, then you can assess much more clearly what the effect of this person has on you. At the beginning of the process, especially with kids who haven't dated before, there's just this like confusion. And most kids, and this is what I've seen, most kids do this completely confused. It's a whole new situation. If you grow up in a Haredi society, a girl never talked to a boy before. It's a whole new experience. And I just say to them at the beginning, there's only 3 possibilities. There's yes, no, and maybe. Okay? If there's a no, there's a no. There's something that the kid's not interested, and you have to respect that. But if there's no clear yes, then I always told my kids, if it's a maybe, give it another chance. A first date is nothing often. A second date is nothing. And sometimes a third date is nothing. Until the people are a little bit more relaxed and a little bit letting their guard down, you don't really know anything. And I have to say that, I'm not a big believer in like love at first sight. It takes some time to build a relationship. And I think that, if the kid comes home starry-eyed the first time, I would be a little bit nervous by that. But I do think that they can all do the yes, no, maybe formula. It's very simple. If it's a maybe, try again. That's my opinion.
Okay. I think we've pretty much tried to cover most of the questions that came in, certainly the main topics. I think I'm going to just turn now for a minute to Rabbi Schoonmaker to ask him for a 1 to 2 minute summary. And really, I hope that everyone is feeling that you're in a challenging situation with Shidduchim, but we hope that this has been helpful in moving you forward and giving you a confidence that you can do it. And maybe we'll just have a couple of words of closing from Rabbi Schoonmaker and from Varda. Rabbi Schoonmaker, did you want to give a couple of closing words?
First off, I just want to say that I don't know many of you, and I look forward to meeting many of you. And I think it's just wonderful, Aleph, to be an institution that there's a shared kinship and concern for each other. I'm proud to be a member of the Hanhal of such an institution that's reaching out to alumni years later, 10 years later, 20 years later. Darchinome is a small yet big institution, and you feel it most at times like this. And it's very special. And with that, I encourage everybody again, really to everybody needs help in this situation. So I encourage everybody to reach, in the Darchinome family, if it's for your old teachers in the NMRC or in the yeshiva, don't be shy. Shidduchim needs a lot. Shidduchim needs a lot of things. It needs a lot of zrizus. Just want to talk about the midas for really 1 to 2 minutes. It needs a lot of zrizus. It needs a lot of alacrity. It's hard work. It's intense for parents, definitely after this. And you really have to try to be. A lot of people, it challenges the comfort zone. Now, every situation of life is a challenge in different ways. You have a bad boss, is a challenge. You have a shalom bayis issue, they're a challenge. Trouble with kids is a challenge. Shidduchim is definitely for parents a challenge. It's not a bad challenge. It's a lot better challenges than some of those other ones. And I think one of the main main midot which are necessary is really a lot of zrizus, to be zariz, to not cut corners, to do what has to get done. Make sure your child's getting what they need to get done. The other thing I would add is seder, is order. I think the more systematic, even if you're listening tonight, when people have like the clear formula, everybody, all the speakers mentioned a lot of nice clear formulas. You have to start to build those formulas yourself. Your seder, your system for doing things, invest a lot in the first kids. It'll make it a lot easier for the kids afterwards, and keep improving your systems. But really, those zrizus and seder, those are the midas I think you need. And you need a lot of siyata d'shmaya, and we have to know that the end Hashem is mezavig zibugim. Chazal tell us that what the Rebbeinu Shalom was involved in since Ma'aser Bereishis is making shidduchim. He's done a good job. Everybody here, I assume, is married. If you're interested in this conversation, he did a good job with all of us. He's doing a good job. We'll have a lot of siyata d'shmaya. And a way for us to get more siyata d'shmaya is shidduchim can be a very selfish thing. Even when you think about it, let's say we're talking about, who's on. As Rav Karlinsky very much said, I'm jealous he said it. I should have said it, but for sure that's, is it in my interest? All Yidden are interest. We have to be, especially in Darchinome, we care about all Yidden. But, by force, you want to, there are mishpachas, there's a mishpacha in the Bavarsky family, you don't say no to shidduch. That's it. You go out, you get married, basically. That's what the Bavarskys were. So, we don't, but so we have to be confrontational, but we have to care about people also. And more, Hamid Palabad Chaver Hu Nenet Chila, so beautiful. We can daven for other people, even other people, our children go out with, daven for them. We have a haftacha, a promise that will be answered. Chila. So, zrizus, seder, and tapping into siyata d'shmaya. I would emphasize again, look for that you did. Reach out to that mentor. By the way, if anybody wants to be my rofi, you did. My family's looking for one still. Thank God we don't have such medical issues. But you need you did, and we all need friends in life. Not just mentors, other people in the community that can be friends. Someone to look out for us, someone who has our back, someone who knows our family, someone who has our interests. Like Rav Shaya said, find that you did. Don't be scared to turn to them. And finally, just know that the path you're going down, hundreds and thousands of good people have gone through that path before, and you'll make it. Bezrat Hashem, you'll make it. And if all else fails, listen. I asked my Rabbi one time, how do you know how to give advice? He says, David, when I really don't know what I'm talking about, the Rebbeinu Shalom puts the right words in my mouth. So it works out. So Bezrat Hashem, it'll work out for all of us. We shall have great siyata d'shmaya.
Amen. Varda, did you want to have a couple of closing words?
Yes. So I have to say that as scary as shidduchim are, as much trepidation as there exists around shidduchim, it's a wonderful stage, and I like to say that it's like going on a trip. Essentially, what you're doing is you're planning your trip for the future. This is your future of your family, and the same way that if you were going on a trip, you have to have certain things you have to take care of. You have to have your documentation, your passport has to be in order. You have to stand in line for security. You have to wait. Sometimes your flight's canceled, and sometimes you are on a packed flight, and sometimes you're on a delayed flight. And these are all things that we can keep in perspective when we keep our eye on the fact that we're going on a wonderful trip. And all the things that go along with Shidduchim that are hard and tedious, as long as we can keep ourselves and our children focused on the fact that this is the gateway to the future, I think it could be done with simcha and with patience and with a lot of excitement about what is coming to be. And my bracha to you is, Be'ezras Hashem, you won't have to wait too long for your luggage to come off the conveyor belt. Be'ezras Hashem, everything should move quickly and smoothly, and you should be able to celebrate simchas and hear much good news.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to our panelists. Thank you to all of you for participating. You have another opportunity in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from tonight, or 2 weeks from this afternoon, depending on wherever you are, will be a Chanukah Yom Iyun. There are going to be 2 slots with 4 shiurim. It's on the website. You should have seen already some publicity about it. And you should register. We look forward to having all of you and many more alumni to join us for Chanukah shiurim. We will have Miriam Spitz and Rabbi Silverberg and myself and Rabbi Schuster giving shiurim on the Chanukah topic. Then this has been a great evening. And again, we thank Emunah Diamond personally for coming up with the idea and shepherding it, as well as Noah in the office from behind the scenes, and all of you for participating. And we hope that we'll be able to have more opportunities to interact. We never anticipated that Corona was going to bring us closer together than we used to be. But there's no question that we have more connection with all of our alumni thanks to Zoom, which we want to continue using. But otherwise, we'll say Erev Tov, and the session is officially closed. And thanks again to our panelists, Rabbi Mrs. Shurin, Rabbi Schoonmaker, and of course to Varda, who has come on board. And we look forward to having you as an honorary, that's the word I'm looking for, an honorary family member of the Darchinoam family.